Hey guys, today I'm reading Blood Princess and I'm reading Chapter 6, Part 1. Chapter 6, When the Tiara Doesn't Fit. Help wanted, a good fairy to reverse the curse. Apply immediately. The Dollar Princess marriages marked a turning point for those who considered Cinderella only a fairy tale. Royalty was no longer something you had to be born into. Instead, it became a commodity that anyone could gain with enough money and the right social connections. All you had to do was get married. Most of these cash-for-titles unions didn't differ much from a traditional royal alliance. Their function was to consolidate power and money. Affection was beside the point. Even without love, the alliance of a title, even without love, the allure of a title through marriage was hard to resist for socially striving Americans. Okay. And British titles bore the highest value due to scarcity. Titled Americans in 1890 Husband Hunting Guide for American Heiresses explained therefore not more than 3,000 persons bearing titles in Great Britain. Of these, only 30 were dukes at that time. If you traveled across the channel to the continent, the field got wider. These were even princes available for those heiresses yearning to be a real princess. These titles held less prestige than you'd expect. Titled Americans stated there are hundreds, nay thousands, of so-called princes in Russia. Their title prince is due to a misapprehension and wrong translation. In France, the eldest son of a duke should assume during his father's lifetime the title of prince. In other words, marrying a prince didn't lead to a throne, but it did mean the prince got an infusion of cold, hard American cash to accompany his princess bride. A plethora of princesses. In 1907, the New York Times reported that 27 American girls had become princesses through marriage by that year. Besides Winnebago Singer, they included Julia Grant, a granddaughter of President Ulysses S. Grant. She married Prince Cantacuzene of Russia. Alice Hayne, a daughter of a New Orleans banker. She married the Prince of Monaco, the monarch of a tiny principality in the southern part of France. Clara Ward, the daughter of a Detroit multimillionaire. She married a Belgian prince only to dump him for a traveling violinist. More about Clara later. The Gilded Age of the Dollar Princess cast for titles, marriages, whimpered to a close with the start of the First World War in 1914. Even before then, the press had begun to report on the darker side of marrying a royal. Once word got out that American heiresses became with a big fat dowry, impoverished European nobles didn't bother with the social niceties of the London season. Instead, they crossed the Atlantic to come a-courting. In 1895, the founder of the National Association of Manufacturers complained that the British come over here and trade us a second-class duke or a third-class earl for a first-class American girl and get several $1 million to boot. In 1888, New York Times headline proclaimed of an American heiress marrying a French duke. She pays all the bills. He thinks himself cheap at the price. The bride was Isabel Blanche Singer, Winneretta's younger sister. In a sad turn of events, Isabel died mysteriously of cardiac arrest at the age of 27. Some thought she'd committed suicide. It didn't help the reputation of these transatlantic unions that Consuelo Vanderbilt and Winneretta Singer weren't alone in finding royal married life a real downer. After their exciting debuting seasons and highly publicized weddings, most dollar princess brides were exiled to country estates far from family and friends, who remained an ocean away in the United States. If that wasn't depressing enough, their husbands' old-world homes were downright medieval compared to the luxurious New World mansions their plutocrat daddies had built back home. The plutocrat families had built back home. What a hot bath. Forget about modern plumbing. Wear hot water in available with a twist of the wrist. Instead, ring a servant to carry water from the kitchen. Feeling cold? Put on other shower. Better yet, cough up even more money to have central heating installed. After all, it was the Dollar Princess's responsibility to modernize her royal husband's out-of-date estate. That's why she'd been wed in the first place. Despite scandal, a few Dollar Princesses' wives abandoned their aristocratic husbands, just as Consuelo and Winnie had. Better to live without a tiara than live with tears. Clara Ward, a very theatrical princess. However, for Michigan heiress Clara Ward, 1873 to 1916, life without her prince didn't go as planned. Recipe for scandal. At first glance, Clara Ward appeared to have all her ducks in a row. She was beautiful, she was charming, she had a millionaire father who died when Clara was a toddler, leaving her with a massive inheritance. Clara's mother possessed the wisdom to have her daughter debut in London, rather than remain in their hometown of Detroit or try their luck in New York. All appeared to be going according to plan when Clara tied the knot with Mary Joseph Anatole Pierre Alphonse de Riquet, the Prince de Caraman-Chimay. At their 1890 wedding in Paris, the middle-aged Belgian prince owned little save his title. In other words, he was one of those fortune hunters the American press complained about. Even so, the alliance was considered a good match for the 17-year-old heiress. It was no surprise that Clara's money immediately went to fixing up the prince's tattoo and paying off his debts. She promptly gave birth to a daughter and a son. Again, all part of the plan. Then suddenly, nothing went as planned. One night in December 1896, while the prince slept, the princess crept out of her bed. She was later joined by a man who wasn't her husband, a traveling violinist named Rigo Jansi. She'd met just over a week earlier at a restaurant in Paris. The Times of Philadelphia described Rigo as anything but an Adonis, being skinny, awkward, pitted with smallpox. Regardless, the two fell madly in love at first sight. Years later, Rigo described their fateful first meeting at the restaurant. She was the most beautiful woman in all Europe. Kings loved her. The night I saw her first, she turned from King Leopold to smile at me. 10 days later, like two gypsies, we stole from her palace in the dead of night. And I took her to my mother's hut in the mountains near Pakhorst, where I was born. From then on, things progressed rather quickly on the scandal front. In January, a mere month after they'd eloped, passionate love gave way to reckless quarrels in a Milan hotel. Clara took off without Rigo, leaving him scrambling to pay his half of the bill. By February, Rigo and Clara had reconciled, and the prince sued for divorce. He wanted cash and custody of their children once the princess confessed all. In March, Clara and Rigo announced they'd be appearing at the Winter Garden Theater in Berlin. In April, the head of the In April, head of the police threatened to expel her from France if she went on stage in Paris. There. Later that same year, police forbade the sale of photographs of the princess. The racy photos revealed Clara's tattoo of the Chimay crown, a leftover from her royal marriage. Retailers trashed thousands of the highly profitable photographs, which only increased public demand. Everyone wanted to see the princess who dumped a prince. It took Rigo and the princess over a year to marry because Rigo already had a wife. Some have speculated that Clara faked her own death to force him to get a divorce. After her miraculous return to life, the princess took to the stage to cash in on the scandal, posing in daringly skin-tight, flesh-colored costumes that made her look as though she were naked. Like her first, this marriage did not last, nor did Clara's inheritance. By 1901, her family had intervened to have her declared incapable of managing her property. Rigo bragged that the princess had bought him a white marble palace on the Nile, and an Italian architect designed the stables for the 16 jet black Arabian horses she bought for me. She gave me my 5,000 violin and caskets of jewels. Clara's adventures continued until her death in Italy in 1916. Newspapers reported the princess was buried in a pauper's coffin. However, Clara had in her revealed an estate of over $1 million, most of which was done in marriage. Turned out she'd saved money all along from her time on the stage. Also left behind a recipe for dessert bears her violinist's name. The origin of Rigo Jansky cake is as murky as his Hungarian past. His name translates into English as Johnny Blackbird. It's believed Rigo asked a baker friend in Budapest to invent the cake for his princess bride. Two facts are certain. The cake is baked of chocolate as dark as a blackbird's wing, and it tasted like chocolate mousse cake. Yum! That's where I'm going to end for today. Bye, guys.